recap, we've been kind of looking at this in a few different prisms. One, the Prophet is 52 years of age when this is happening now, right? He's not like a young person as such. But throughout this process, he's learning from the angel, asking questions. Who is this? What is this? The angel's asking him, do you know who this is? Do you know what this is? So he's still like learning. And we're talking about this also through the prism of healing, that a decade plus now of persecution in Mecca, the death of two people who are deeply beloved to him, his uncle Abu Talib, his wife Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. He then thereafter faces a lot of tribulation in Ta'if itself, and has to experience that, in a way that's very difficult. And after all of that, he's given this gift of al-Isra wal-Miraj, right? Meant to be in a prism of healing. And the combination of these two things, the knowledge acquisition and فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا, knowledge is a source of contentment. It creates an opportunity for healing, and a bunch of other frames that we were kind of talking about this in, right? So we're going to pick up with this text, and we're now at a place where the Prophet has been meeting at different levels of the heavens with different individuals, and he's going to meet the Prophet Ibrahim now at the 7th level. Bismillah. So as the text continues, he says, then they ascended to the 7th heaven. Jibra'il asked for the gate to be opened. Someone said, who is this? Jibra'il, who is with you? Muhammad. Has he been sent for? Yes. Welcome to him from his family. May Allah grant him long life, a brother of ours and a deputy of Allah. And what excellent brother and deputy. What an excellent visit is this. The gate was opened. The Prophet saw Ibrahim, the friend, right? Khalilullah, Ibrahim alayhi salam, sitting at the gate of paradise on a throne of gold, the back of which was leaning against the inhabited house, which is called Al-Bayt al-Ma'mur. With him were a company of his people. The Prophet greeted him, and he returned his greeting and said, welcome to the righteous son and the righteous prophet. Then Ibrahim alayhi salam said, and so Sheikh Muhammad ibn Alawi, who authors this text, he says, Ma'mur means inhabited with the remembrance of Allah and a great number of angels. So like what our hadith teaches us, is that Bayt al-Ma'mur essentially is kind of the inhabited house, meaning where the Kaaba exists in a worldly realm in Mecca. Al-Bayt al-Ma'mur is the place that every day 70,000 angels come, they pray to Allah, and then they leave. They're given a designated point then to just engage in the dhikr of Allah. And then from there, 70,000 new angels come the next day, and they pray, and then they leave. And there's a continuity to this that we can talk about in a bit. What I'd like for you to do is open up the 52nd chapter of the Quran, its 4th verse. This is Surah At-Tur. Yeah, if you just open up the whole thing, like the first few verses are pretty short. So if we can have somebody read the first 6 verses, because they all kind of flow together, the Arabic and the English. Surah At-Tur is the 52nd. You could read either or, the English or the Arabic. Yeah, go ahead. Good. Yeah.
So by mouth word and by the book written and on open pages for all to read, and by the sacred house frequently visited, and by the canopy raised high, and by the seas set on fire.
Okay. Can someone read the Arabic? Yeah, go ahead. Jazakallah khair. So in that fourth verse, it's explicitly mentioning wal bayt al ma'mur, right? The often frequented house. And so essentially the way we make tawaf around the Kaaba when we're here, right? Has anybody ever been to Mecca before in the room? I know some of you have because we've gone together, right? So some of you have been to Mecca and Medina before. And in Mecca, the way people are making tawaf around the Kaaba, the angels are making tawaf around al Bayt al Ma'mur, right? They're praying at this place. And the Prophet ﷺ mentions explicitly 70,000 angels are visiting this. They're performing here as he is uh, being shown this. So there's a hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. The Prophet says, "Then I was shown Al Bayt Al Ma'mur. I asked Jibreel about it, and he said, 'This is Al Bayt Al Ma'mur, where 70,000 angels perform prayers daily, and when they leave, they never return to it, but always a fresh batch comes to it daily.'" Right? In the same hadith, the Prophet said, "Then the Bayt Al Ma'mur was raised up to me. I said, 'Oh Jibreel, what is this?' He replied, 'It is the Bayt Al Ma'mur. 70,000 angels enter into it daily, and after they come out, they never return again.'" Here now, some people would say that that instance where we talked about the Prophet choosing between the vessel of milk and the vessel of wine, do people remember, right? We'd spend a lot of time talking about it because we were saying the Prophet is given two permissible choices. He can drink the wine or the milk, and they're both permissible, but even the permissible choice of drinking the wine has consequence to it, right? And the permissible choice of drinking the milk has consequence to it. One renders positive, the milk, one renders negative, the wine, but they were both allowed. So the allowance of something wasn't enough itself what determines it to be a good action. So here in this hadith, they say the vessels were then brought to me. The first one contained wine and the second one contained milk, and both of them were placed before me. I chose milk. It was said, "You did right. Allah will guide rightly through you, your ummah, on the natural course." The 50 daily prayers were made obligatory for me. And then he narrated the rest of the hadith to the end. We're going to get to the 50 prayers later, right? But it's just one hadith that we're kind of looking at this collated hadith. They're talking about Al Bayt al Ma'mur. What I want you to think about before we kind of continue here in this instance where the Prophet is engaging Ibrahim alayhi salam, how do we understand the relevance of 70,000 angels coming to pray? Like we pray, these guys just prayed. They're coming to Al Bayt al Ma'mur every single day. And then a new batch is coming every day, 70,000. 70,000 come and pray, and then they leave. And then the next day, 70,000 come and pray, and then they leave. What is that relevance to us? Does the question make sense? So if you can turn to the person next to you, like, what do we extrapolate in terms of its relevance to us that these 70,000 angels are doing this, right? And you'd want to think about that from the standpoint of what's the point of an angel to begin with? Do you know? Because we're not supposed to be angels, we're humans. There's distinctions between us and angels, right? Angels are creatures of just strict obedience. Foundationally, they're said to be made from light, the way that we're said to be made from earth. The jinn are said to be made from fire. I like to ask my kids sometimes, like, how do they know that they're not a jinn? You know? And they're like, Baba, why do you ask us these questions? But like, how? How do you know, Kareem? How do you know that you're not a jinn? But the idea that we're made from earth, but like if I scraped off my skin, it doesn't turn into dirt. So an angel being made from light foundational or jinn being made from fire, you're not like conceptualizing like a being of fire or a being of light. Does that make sense? The angels are also like strictly obedient to the divine. That's just what they do. They're obedient. There's some theological opinions that say some of the angels may or may not have free will, the way we have agency. So, like senior angels like Jibrail and others, some might say that they have agency in some capacity. Most would say, like all the angels, they're just doing what God told them to do. Like that's what they do. Do you know? And you want to think about it, not as a tangent, but in Surah Baqarah, when Allah makes like us, He makes Adam, inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, that I'm going to put a khalifa on the earth, right? The angels, what do they say? Right? قالوا أتجل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن نسبح بحمدك ونقدس لك. They say, like, why are you going to put something on the earth that's going to create facade and shed blood? And we glorify you, right? And we praise you. Do you know? And Allah says, Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun. Indeed, I know what you don't know. The angels are strict creatures of obedience, and they're even asking questions of God, right? So if an angel that only obeys God asks questions, like as a human, you could definitely ask questions as part of comprehension and understanding. Do you see? But you want to understand categorically what's happening here. These creatures of obedience, they're going to do this thing, 70,000 of them every day, and a new batch comes. And when they're done, they're just engaged in like the dhikr of Allah. What does that have to do with us? Like, what do we extrapolate from this and its relevance? If you just turn the person next to you, talk about it a bit, and then we'll come back and discuss. Yeah. Yeah. Well, like Jannah is expansive. Do you know what I mean? So they exist in like a frame of reality that's different from our frame of existence. Sorry? No, but I mean, in understanding the way that it works, like with some form of regularity, they're moving from one place and then a new group comes in. Do you know? Yeah. Does it make sense? Yeah. There's a lot of them, they do this, and then another group that's a lot does it, is kind of the point. You see? This is a different designated group. 70,000, they're made just to do this, and then they go. Does that make sense? The angels on your shoulders are just staying with you on your shoulders. Well, those ones stay there. They do this prayer, and then they go. Do you see? And that's why I'm saying why. Like, how is that relevant to us? Do you get what I mean? Yeah? Okay.
I had the pleasure. I had the real pleasure to get to the ceremony now, and I like it there. Yeah, great. Mentally, it's teaching me a lesson. Because like the most for me, you realize now you just lost some stuff, now you got to pay. Calculate that. You just save right back. Like, I ran back to this goal, and now I gotta get back to this. Plus,
Okay, so what do we think? What's some of the stuff we can kind of draw on from here? Right, 70,000 angels coming. There's this continuity. They leave, 70,000 more show up. So what, like, why is this important for me to know? What do we discuss? What did you talk about?
I joined late, so I was pretty much catching like
What did they talk about? What did you catch from them? Yeah.
the only part I really caught was the 70,000 angels going around doing tawaf.
Great. I'm glad somebody listened to something. So why do we think that's something important for us to know?
Should be good examples of how we conduct ourselves with discipline and
Okay. Yeah.
obedience.
If angels are doing it, why we're not?
I think in a way that can kind of show how like Allah doesn't need us to worship Him, right? Like Allah in the heavens, He already has 70,000 angels at all times of the day doing tawaf, right? And even on Earth, like when you said that number, I started actually like doing the math, like how many humans do like Umrah every day, and I calculated about 36,000. So it's even double in the heavens, right? So
How did you get 36,000?
I looked up like the average amount that go per year, and then just divided by 365.
Oh, interesting. Look at you, so smart. Mashallah. Great. Yeah.
So I think it just represents how Allah doesn't need us to worship Him, right? And Allah talks about that in the Quran, that if you don't worship Him, He'll replace you with people who will, right? So,
Yeah, right? Like 70,000. Aside from the fact that it's mind-boggling, how many angels must exist? Do you know? And recognizing then that how we understand the reason for worship and giving it a definition, God is ghani. He's free of need. He's not the one that needs my worship. And even if one made the argument that Allah needed worship, He didn't need our worship. He's got 70,000 creatures of light that are with regularity just designated to pray to Him. So, who is the one that's supposed to benefit from the worship that we engage in? Because if that worship is not being done to compel the divine, He's already got like all these angels doing this thing, right? What's the point of worship then to begin with? It's not a rhetorical question. What's the point of it? It's for us to what? Yeah. What else? Like, what's the point of this thing of worship? Ibadah, like, why? Do you know what I mean? If I sit at home and like cook, Like somebody's going to eat the food. It's for them. There could even be mutual benefit. Do you know what I mean? We could be in here, right? We like build things for people. Do you know? But in understanding here, I'm praying to an entity, and what I'm doing in praying to that entity bears no bearing on that entity. Do you see what I mean? And a reflection on that becomes imperative, because some of us are just praying the way the prophet says to not pray. You're like a rooster pecking at the ground. Do you know? And that rooster that's pecking at the ground is engaged in that process with like mindlessness. They see like the seed and they're just pecking. They're going up and down, right? If I'm praying in that mode, or I'm choosing to pray or fast or charity, volunteerism, kindness, generosity, right? None of it is about compelling God. Like when you're making dua, you're not making dua to force God into something. So like, how are you? Look at you. Oh man, so pregnant. How are you feeling? Alhamdulillah. Can we get you anything?
I have some clementines in my bag.
Yeah?
I'm good.
Not to make it awkward for you in this room full of people who are now like, great, amazing. Yeah. Well, if you need anything during this, let us know. Try not to go into labor during the holiday. Anybody here, doctor? No? Yeah. Great. Okay. So, what were we talking about? Huh? Yeah, the rooster is pecking, right? Like, if I don't have a frame of understanding of what the point is of the practice, it's going to be easy to forego it. And if I don't recognize like what the objective is and who the beneficiary is of this thing, it's going to be easy to leave it behind. The struggle that comes with the implementation gets rooted in incentivizing it attached to its aligned purpose, not what I determine its benefit is. And then I set a ceiling saying that, you know what? I'm good. Like struggle is different. If I struggle with just getting one of these done in a day, you got to do one before you do 5. But if I determine like one is sufficient, then my approach to it is problematic because I'm not understanding it for its intended purpose from the one who created me as also being the creator of that worship that was given to me for my benefit. Do you see? And if I don't have a paradigm shift that understands that, like, God has 70,000 angels a day visiting Bayt al-Ma'mur that is aligned with the Kaaba in this worldly existence, it's now in a place that is beyond human existence, Bayt al-Ma'mur, and creatures that do nothing other than worship the divine. That's what it is that they're doing. Do you see? And me shifting now to a place that says, like, who is worship actually for? You're gonna ultimately become a worshiper of something. Do you know? Whether you buy into it or not does not become the variable of its validity. And you think about all the things that humanity has the capacity to be a worshiper of. The word abd doesn't just translate as a servant or a slave, right? You're an abd because you rely on something to exist. All of us need something to be. Do you know? You can't live without food or drink. You can't live without air to breathe, right? Allah uniquely is a Rabb because, again, he is Ghani, he's free of need. Allah does not rely on anything to be, he simply is. We don't function in the same way. And when you're actively now choosing what to worship, the paradox of decision making is that when you don't consciously make a choice, you still have essentially chosen. And if you buy into, for a moment, even theoretically, the idea that everybody's going to fundamentally become a worshiper of something, even if it's not consciously ascertained for me, what am I unconsciously like a worshiper of? Do you know? أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. Do you see the one who takes his whims, his desires as being his God? The validation of others, a worship of money and wealth, a worship of like materialistic worlds, a worship of physical beauty. Like there's so much that goes into what the potential is to become a worshiper of. And so there's two parts to this thing, right? You recognize what's the point of worship and who is it supposed to be beneficial to, but the act in and of itself of worship is not just what it is that renders benefit. The worshiping act has to be something that's beneficial, and the one that's the object of the worship has to be beneficial. We have a Qibla, it gives us direction, right? What aligns direction for you? Is it the Qibla of our tradition? These angels do tawaf of al-Bayt al-Ma'mur. 36,000 people a day are making Umrah. They're doing tawaf on average, right? What is it that you are like walking circles around every day? Do you see what I mean? And you align that with a recognition. Something's got me running around in circles all day. What is that thing? And is it the thing that's worthy of my worship? The thing that I should be subservient to in a way that renders empowerment back to me. And what our religion posits itself off on is that the only thing that's worthy of your worship is Allah, because that's what's going to always bring you back benefit and gain. And if you are worshiping other than Allah, right? Like you can, in the most literal and metaphorical sense of things, be prostrating to something. Do you know? And what are you in prostration of? And is that thing worth it? Does it come with like all kinds of qualifications and all kinds of requirements that are unhealthy to be in worship of? And it stems from this conversation point. Man, I just, right now, like you can go to the Kaaba 100,000 times better is the prayer in Mecca than anywhere else, right? May Allah accept it from us. Understanding like the metaphysical reality that the Kaaba is aligned with Al-Bayt al-Ma'mur, existing in the seventh heaven. And I can just sit and think, like, Allah has these creatures that are engaged in this. I don't want to have an arrogance in my worship that says somehow my worship is bringing benefit to the one I claim to be a worshiper of. But I want to have a sense of real recognition. Like this thing is supposed to be for me, and it's supposed to be about me being the one that takes away from it. Do you get what I mean? And then what I get out of it is what it is that I'm going to put into it. Do you know? And if I'm the determiner of like what this is, I think, I want, I feel. Hatu burhanakum, like we see in the Quran, like bring your evidences. Do you know? I think, I feel is not what defines like modes of spiritual exercise. The one that you worship is giving you insight. This is how you should be in worship of Him, and not geographically specific to any part of the world. Certain modes of worship can only exist in certain places. You can't do tawaf of Washington Square Park. You can only do tawaf of the Kaaba. It only exists in Mecca, tawaf. But you can fast outside of Ramadan and inside of Ramadan, correct? Right? You can give charity in any part of the world. Smiling is a sadaqah. You could do that anywhere. Do you see what I mean? But understanding it starts at the baseline of like this thing of worship. What's its point? Point number two, what am I actually worshiping in the course of my day? And the association of partners with the divine is not just like consciously, like kind of polytheistic or whatever else, but I'm worshiping money, then I'm worshiping money. You know, may Allah protect me from that. I got to admit it in order to dismantle it. Do you know? I worship vanity. I worship like whatever I worship is going to dilute or potentially also pollute like the worship of the divine. And how do I like realign myself back to it? Do you see what I mean? right? So let's take a quick minute on this concept of like worship and who benefits from worship and the point of it. Let's just turn the person next to us. It's important things like the base of our religion. It's a God-centric religion. Everything goes back to God. So let's just talk for a couple minutes. What are we taking away from this part of the conversation? And then we'll return back to the text and read some more. But go ahead.
I would say also, can't stand that. Right. Literally passed out.
You gotta be honest with yourself. What are you doing? And if you're not praying, why are you not praying? You're not praying, you're praying for something else. I'm like, damn, you killed me right now. These people need me before they're that's
Why some people you saw him raise people from the dead. What the hell is
But that's because also like society not out loud. Unless you're around that crowd. Like right now, that's not a serious topic.
our teacher was better. That's
Yeah, I can like my sweater. I wonder why. Oh, we're talking about the sorry.
Okay, so what are some of the things we're taking away from that part of the conversation? What does it bring up for people? This idea of like who worship is for, how do we kind of align the purpose of worship towards what its intended purpose is? What do we discuss? I heard everyone talking. Yeah.
I was just talking to you guys about joy, like trying to like I'm
doodling you as so I'm like listening, and I'm like, I had a long week. This is really nice to be here. But we were talking about like benefits of worship, and then I was thinking also just like how am I like acknowledging the divine and like the blessings all around, like and also just like walking around worshiping, just being like, yo, this is a blessing, or this is a trial, right? Which is also a blessing, right? And like having perspective like that, just like trying to pay attention and like notice things, like what are all like the really beautiful things, right? And being appreciative of that, and even like appreciative of the stuff that's really hard, that's like really like heart wrenching or gut wrenching, like that also like has its own benefit because it gets me thinking about stuff, or it gets me like connecting with people, right? And have it like when we go through trials, like I know I got a Rolodex of people who I like tap in with, right? And like that inherently benefits as well.
Great, mashallah. Firdaus, you're gonna say something?
For us, what came up was like in our hearts, like, I don't know, but in our what we're constantly thinking about is work, and just trying to be not negligent to our like worldly responsibility, but also how can we be more aware of Allah, the after, even while we are in work, doing work. So just be more mindful rather than occupying our thoughts with what to do, how to like grow in your career, all of those things, but also like other internal things that we can practice.
Amazing. Now, one of the ways you want to nuance this conversation also, you weren't created to be an angel, right? When the verse says, like, why are you making this thing that's going to create facade and wickedness and whatever else, right? وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ, right? We glorify you, we praise you, we sanctify you. Do you know? When we get to a place where it moves from 50 prayers to 5 prayers a day, we're going to get to that like sooner than later. That's what's coming up here. Like, yeah, you were made to pray 50, but it got reduced to 5. But the whole idea is within the kind of time frames between the 5, there's other stuff you're supposed to be doing. Do you know? And the verse acknowledges that like humanity is going to do things that humans shouldn't be doing. But if you look at things in isolation and not see text and how it speaks to each other, we have a tradition that teaches us if we were a creation that didn't make mistakes, God would replace us with a creation that did. And he'd have a creation to forgive. Like, why? Because you weren't made to be an angel. You were made to be human. And to be human is inherently to make a mistake. The ability to love in our tradition is rooted in this idea. And I might talk about this at Jummah on Friday, because yesterday I was talking to students here, and I was telling them, like, your college students, you're going to have a week off spring break at the end of Ramadan. This might be the only time in your life uninterrupted that you can go do i'tikaf in the masjid and spiritual retreats in the masjid. When I was a freshman in college in the year 2000, it was crazy because it was somebody's birthday yesterday at the halakha, 2 people's birthday. One of them was born in 2006, 6 years after I started college. Do you know? But when I was a freshman in college, Ramadan was in the winter, and over the Christmas break, like it was Ramadan time, right? That's how old I am. 11 days earlier, and we get to March, right? Every year, 11 days, it pushes back. Do you know? It takes about 33 years for there to be a full cycle. Do you know what I mean? And when I was 18, I got to do i'tikaf the first time because it was between semesters, and it was amazing. Do you know? And I think I might say something about that at Jummah. But also one of the things that I think is important to talk about that I might talk about is like the idea isn't that our pursuit is a futile pursuit of perfection. That's not what Islam is telling us to pursue. It's telling us to embrace the fact that we are going to be imperfect, and the perfection of God's love is that he loves us despite our imperfection. But we don't have an indifference towards it, but we recognize this. We weren't made to be angels. Do you know? You weren't made to just pray and just stand in prayer all day. You were made to do other stuff. And when you're nuancing the purpose of worship is that you're informed by the other stuff when you bring it to worship because you're carrying it inwardly, but also like what the worship does is meant to inform the moments that are outside of those defined moments of worship. Does that make sense? Right? If God wanted you to be an angel in the truest sense of it, do you know? Like he would have then made you an angel, but he made you human for a reason. And to understand your humanness necessitates understanding that like 5 daily prayers, 1 month of fasting, 1 time in a year giving zakat, 1 time in your life performing hajj. There's a lot of hours in between that are not those things. Those things are included within them, but they're not seen separately. They inform, and they're supposed to then have impact on the in-between times. Do you get what I mean? Right? That is rooted in our potential capacity. One of the verses that I'd like for you to look at as we look at this, because it's easy to like let shaitan get in our heads. If you go to Surah Teen, it's the 95th chapter of the Quran. It's 4th verse. Somebody want to read it?
English or Arabic?
Either one's fine.
I mean, I already read, so I'll let someone else go.
No, it's okay. Just go for it.
Okay.
You're good.
By the fig and the olive of, wait, which ayah was it?
Just you read all of it. Yeah, go for it.
By the fig and olive of Jerusalem and Mount Sinai and the secure city of Mecca, indeed we created humans in the best form.
Okay, let's stop there.
Okay.
Right? That was the verse we wanted to read, 95:4. Somebody read the Arabic. You can read it. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Great, right? لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. We created humanity in the most beautiful of forms. Meaning like the human was made in the most beautiful form, and that means like out of everything. Do you know? Musa ibn Isa was a governor who was newlywed and was speaking to his wife the way newlyweds speak, and the moon was shining upon them. And he says to his wife, "You're so beautiful. You're so beautiful. Your beauty is even greater than the beauty of the moon. And if you are not more beautiful than the moon, then we're divorced." And the wife is paying attention because Sharia is a serious business. And divorce is one of the times that the Prophet says, even if it's done in jest, it's taken seriously. So she says to her husband, because he creates a conditional statement, right? Do you know what you just said? And then this guy, like, wakes up and he goes to scholar after scholar. Like, I said this thing, what do I do? And they say, you're divorced. And then they come to Imam Shafi and he says, I said this thing to my wife. What am I supposed to do? And Imam Shafi says, you're good. And the other scholars say, why are you just telling him what he wants to hear? Right? He's a governor, right? Like Islam is about reality. Do you know? People sometimes tell people in privileged positions like certain things that they don't tell people in underprivileged positions. So our religion is not that. Everybody's got to pray the same prayers. You know what I mean? But Imam Shafi says no, because Allah says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. We created humanity in the most beautiful of forms, meaning that humans are in a more beautiful form than anything, including like this beautiful moon. Do you see? But that's the idea. Aspirationally, like you got to move in a place where you live to the potential of your beauty. And an integral component to that, to live in relation to the mode in which you were created, you got to be worshiping the right thing. If you're worshiping the wrong thing, it's going to inevitably lead to a place that degrades the state that you were meant to be created as a worshiper of. The same way we weren't built and designed to work as hard as we work. We just simply weren't. We weren't built to consume as much as we consume. You have a month that tells you how to reclaim consumption. Do you know? And when you go against the design, it creates imbalance. And part of the design is you were built to be a worshiper of Allah, not a worshiper of the creation of Allah. And it's not just about like supremacist notions of what beauty is. Don't let whiteness define beauty. Let like the Sunnah define beauty. And our Prophet's innate sense of ihsan enabled him to see what was inherently beautiful in everything around him and help people to recognize their own innate beauties. Do you understand? Allah doesn't need our worship. We need our worship, and we need our worship to be of the one that's worthy of our worship. Does that make sense? Does it? Okay. So if we continue, right, let's read through this. Then Ibrahim said, order your community to increase their seedlings of paradise, for its soil is excellent and its land is plentiful. The Prophet ﷺ said, what are the seedlings of paradise? He replied, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-ali al-azim, that there is no change nor might except with Allah, the High, the Almighty, right? That you're saying this statement. Another version says, convey my greetings to your community and tell them that paradise has excellent soil and sweet water, and that its seedlings are subhanallah, like glory to Allah, walhamdulillah, and praise to Allah, wa la ilaha illallah, and there is no God but Allah, wallahu akbar, and Allah is the greatest, right? That you're like saying these adhkar, like you're saying these litanies as a way that they start to inform and enforce. Dhikr, remembrance, is like that's its point, because it's not that your mind is devoid of something, but when it's forgotten, remembrance brings it back. Do you see? And when you're engaged in like why I show you these verses is so you learn them and you memorize them. When we're in the hadith like thing on Monday, and I say like memorize these hadith, if you stick them in your heart, they'll have a greater capacity to inform decisions. Do you know? So when you're saying like words, you're not just rotely like iterating them, but with purpose, like they're informing, so they come back up at later times, right? You ever listen to like a song again and again and again and again? You ever like look at an image again and again and again and again? And it just pops up in your head when you're not even thinking about it. Do you know? You ever tell your friend, like, you're singing this thing and now it's stuck in my head, right? How does it get stuck in your head? Because that's just the way that you're wired. And so now, if there's an iteration of like, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, like it's going to pop up into your head. The same way you know definitively, you hear these other things again and again, and they just start popping up in your head at opportune times and inopportune times. That's what remembrance is. Like you remember when your mind has become emptied of something, you bring it back to your mind. Hold on a second. I got a God that isn't going to be happy that I'm about to gossip. I got a God that doesn't want me to be racist. Do you know? This is what taqwa is, right? It's what we said in the khutbah, like, I don't remember when, 2 Fridays ago. I wasn't here last Friday, I think. Yeah, right? Like I said, tawbah is if you fall in the hole, do you know? Tawbah is the vehicle that gets you out of the hole, right? Repentance. Taqwa is the mechanism inside of you that's telling you, hey, the hole's coming, don't fall in it. Do you see? And one of the things that enables us to like heighten that sense of consciousness is this practice, right? So the Prophet Ibrahim, he's saying 2 phrases, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-ali al-azim, and these other like kind of litanies, subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar. You sit down at the end of your prayer, right? And you say these things, right? You engage in it with meaning. Why am I glorifying God? Why am I praising God? Why am I proclaiming his greatness? Do you know? And you attach just like for an extra minute reasons to it, it'll stick a little bit more. With Ibrahim were sitting a company of people with pristine faces similar to the whiteness of a blank page, and next to them were people with something in their faces. The latter stood and entered a river in which they bathed. Then they came out having purified some of their hue. Then they entered another river and bathed and came out having purified some more. Then they entered a third river and bathed and purified themselves, and their hue became like that of their companions. They came back and sat next to them. The Prophet ﷺ said, O Jibra'il, who are those with these white faces and those who had something in their hues? And what are these rivers in which they entered and bathed? He replied, the ones with white faces are a people who never tarnish their belief with injustice or disobedience. Those with something in their hues are a people who would mix good deeds with bad ones. Then they repented and Allah relented toward them. As for these rivers, the first is Allah's mercy, the second is his favor, his ni'mah, his blessing, and the third is their Lord has given them a pure beverage to drink, in reference to a verse in the Quran. Then the Prophet was told, this is your place and the place of your community. He saw that his community were divided in two halves, one half wearing clothes that seemed as white as a blank page, the other were wearing clothes that seemed the color of ashes or dust. He entered the inhabited house, al-Bayt al-Ma'mur, and those who were wearing the white clothes entered with him. Those that wore ash-colored clothes were no longer able to see him, and yet they were in the best of states. The Prophet prayed in the inhabited house together with those of the believers that were with him. Every day, 70,000 angels enter the inhabited house, who shall never return to it until the day of resurrection. Not that they come back, but like at the day of resurrection, this like takes a pause. Does it make sense? This house is exactly superposed to the Kaaba. If one stone fell from it, it will fall on top of the Kaaba. The angels who have entered it never see it again. Then a version says that the presentation of the vessels, where the Prophet chose the vessel of milk, and Jibrail's approval took place at this point. Okay. Then the Prophet was raised up to the lot tree of the farthest limit. This is called a Sidrat al-Muntaha, right? We might have heard this construct before. So if you go to Surat al-Najm, is the 53rd chapter of the Quran. And if we look at the 14th, 15th, and 16th verse. So 53, 14, 15, and 16. Can somebody pull those up and read them for us?
At the low tree of the most extreme limit in the seventh heaven, near which is the garden of eternal residence, while the low tree was overwhelmed with heavenly splendors.
Okay, can someone read the Arabic? Yeah, go ahead.
The 14, 15, and 16 verse.
Yeah.
عند سدرة المنتهى عندها جنة المأوى إذ يغشى السدرة ما يغشى.
So here is like what the Prophet is being approached now. This essentially, this lot tree, right? What you got to know is like this is a boundary that angels are not allowed to go past. The Prophet is going to be given access past this point. Like even the angel Jibra'il, the chieftain of the angels, when you ever see kind of calligraphy or woodwork that is of what's called the prophet's sandal, right? People know what I'm talking about, the prophet's sandal. Yeah, if you look it up online, I have a computer in front of me. So if everyone can see this like row, is that big enough? Right? That image is known as the prophet's sandal, right? And in a lot of poetry and in other kind of things, people talk about this because the notion is like even the prophet's sandals were so remarkable, they could go into parts of Jannah that the angel Jibreel wasn't allowed to go into. Do you see? Right? And there's a lot that gets kind of like extrapolated from this, but the Sidratul Muntaha, this is like one of the things that it's designated as, like in existence in actual space, it becomes a marker of a boundary that only certain individuals like go beyond this boundary. So the prophet was taken now to this place after he was shown these things at Al Bayt al Ma'mur. The prophet was raised up to the lot tree of the farthest limit, right? As-Sidrat al-Muntaha. There ends whatever ascends from the earth before it is seized, and whatever descends from above before it is deceased. It is a tree from the base of which issues rivers whose water is never brackish, meaning it does not change in taste or color or smell, and the sweat of those who drink it in paradise has the fragrance of musk. And rivers of milk whose taste does not change after it is drunk, and rivers of wine which bring only pleasure to those who drink it, and rivers of purified honey. Someone on his mount could travel under its shade for 70 years and still not come out of it. Meaning, if you were on a horse and you rode for 70 years straight, like the shade of this tree was still like that expansive. The lotus fruit that grows on it resembles the jars of Hijar near Medina. Its leaves are shaped like the ears of the she elephant, and each leaf could wrap up this community entirely. One version says one of its leaves could wrap up all creatures. On top of each leaf, there was an angel who covered it with colors which cannot even be described. Whenever he covered it by Allah's order, it would change. One version says it would turn into sapphire and chrysolite, the beauty of which it is impossible for anyone to praise according to what its merit. On it were moths of gold. From the base of the tree issued 4 more rivers, 2 hidden rivers and 2 visible ones. The Prophet asked, "What are these, O Jibra'il?" He replied, "As for the hidden ones, they are 2 rivers of paradise. The visible ones are the Nile and the Euphrates." Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, who is like known for his commentaries on Quran, he said, what is meant by this, and Allah knows best, which is an important thing, right? Like when people are kind of giving interpretations, they're giving insights, they're going to always qualify, Wallahu ta'ala alam, and Allah knows best, because like they're yielding to the idea that they're limited in their knowledge. Like they're going to qualify, like Allah knows best. What is meant by this, and Allah knows best, is that these 2 rivers, the Nile and the Euphrates, resemble the rivers of paradise in their purity and sweetness and fluidity and such of their qualities. As the Prophet said in the hadith narrated by Abu Huraira, al-ajwa min al-jannah, that the date, the ajwa, is from paradise. That is, it resembles the fruit of paradise, not that it itself originates in paradise. For if that were the meaning, then the senses would testify to the contrary. Therefore, the meaning which imposes itself is other than that. Similarly, the source of origin of these rivers is on earth. One version says, at the base of the tree ran a source called Salsabil. From it issued 2 rivers. One is the Kawthar. The Prophet said, I saw it flowing impetuously. So Kawthar is like a fount that is given particular to the Prophet ﷺ, right? A place where people will be given like drinks from his hand at Jannah. May Allah make us from those who are blessed to drink from the Prophet's hand on the Day of Judgment. The Prophet said, I saw it flowing impetuously, roaring at the speed of arrows, right? Like if you memorize the short surahs of the Quran, Inna a'tayna kal kawthar, right? That indeed we gave you al kawthar. Like, so literally al kawthar is the fountain. Kawthar also means like, like the word for the stars in the sky is kaukab. If you ever see like a sky that is filled with stars. You know, you go to like places in the world that are not Manhattan. Do you know what I mean? Like you've been to Oklahoma or like Nebraska or South Dakota, right? Has anybody ever seen like a star filled? Huh?
I said, or New Jersey.
No, it's different. It is definitely not the same. There is no part of New Jersey that looks like just this. Because you know why? I grew up in Jersey. I'm not gonna hate on Jersey. I like Jersey, right? Jersey's a dirty place. Do you know what I mean? Right? You go to a place that doesn't have a lot of pollution in it, the skyline is experienced differently. Do you know? Like some of us have been in New Mexico together. Do you know what I mean? And Abiquiu, there's a beautiful like place called Dar al Islam. It was started in the 70s by European converts. They were a really remarkable story in how they maintained it. The local town's population is like 180 people. Do you know? In this like area of New Mexico. The first time I went there, was anybody there the first time we did the retreat? You were there, right? Yeah, Luna was awake. So we were told also that like this is a place where kind of physical and metaphysical realities blend. Like veils are uncovered, like jinns frequent these places, do you know? And so our sister Luna decided at 3 in the morning to walk around looking for jinn. And she didn't find any, I don't think. Huh? Yeah, do you know? It rained one day, and the sky is so clear there, you could see 3 rainbows in the sky, right? Not just one, like clear. Do you know? Kaukab is like stars in the sky, right? That form, kaukab, means a lot of something. Do you know? Right? So Kauthar has the same form. Can you see like how the letters line up? Kaukab, Kauthar. So Kauthar means like you were given a lot of good things, right? Inna atayna kal Kauthar. Like we gave you so many blessings. Do you know? Just the way like there's so many stars in the sky, right? You were given so many blessings, right? And then what does the verse say after? Fasalli li rabbika wanhar, right? So then worship Allah, make salah to your Rabb, wanhar, and do the nahr, right? Like the sacrifice on Eid. So like salah and charity kind of go hand in hand a lot. Do you see what I mean? So this is what like Kauthar is. I saw it flowing impetuously, roaring at the speed of arrows. Near it were pavilions of pearls, sapphire, and chrysolite, on top of which nested green birds more delicate than any you have ever seen. On its banks were vessels of gold and silver. It ran over pebbles made of sapphire and emerald. Its water was whiter than milk. The prophet took one of the vessels and scooped some water and drank. It was sweeter than honey and more fragrant than musk. Jibrail said to him, "This is the river which Allah has given you as a special gift, and the other river is the river of mercy." The Prophet bathed in it, and his past and future mistakes were forgiven. So we saw like the Prophet's heart opened a couple of times in the Seerah, right? It's a Seerah class, even though we've been talking about Al-Isra and Mi'raj for a long time. It's an important part of the Seerah. When the Prophet was a child, you remember like a year and a half ago, we talked, the angels came when he was a child and opened his chest and cleaned his heart with Zamzam and other stuff, right? And then he's got like his heart cleaned again. And so now he's in this thing. It's interesting how water plays like a role metaphorically and literally in our legal tradition. It's also a purifying agent, right? You make water with wudu. Do you know when the Prophet talks about like praying 5 times a day, you know, and he gives the example like somebody took a bath in the river 5 times a day, would you say they're dirty? You know, it's the idea, right? But he's engaged in this experientially. This is why like we try to take people to the beach and to mountains, and you're in nature and you're out there. And when you get old, you become too rigid and you feel like I'm uncomfortable if I go dip my feet into some flowing water. Do you know? And you think about like just how water, I mean, we talked about this when we talked about Zamzam and the creation of Zamzam. You know, Zamzam has flowed since the beginning, right? Like it's exemplary of so much stuff, including the idea that like Allah's bounties are limitless. Like Zamzam doesn't stop, man. Do you know? And you take it with a recognition of like what it's really giving us an indication towards. The Prophet bathed in this thing. And you want to think like, why? Do you know what I mean? Right? Like you see a pure substance, you want like all of your being to experience this thing. You know, I don't want to just see it. So when you go for Umrah, there's a reason why after you make tawaf and you pray these 2 rak'ahs, you're not just drinking Zamzam, but you're supposed to like wash your face with it, pour it on you. Do you know what I mean? Because it's got barakah in it. You know, you're cleaning yourself with something that's like beyond pure. Do you see what I mean? One version says, as the low tree of the farthest limit, at the low tree of the farthest limit, the Prophet saw Jibreel in his angelic form. He had 600 wings. Every single wing could cover the entire firmament. From his wings, embellishments were strewn in all directions, such as rare pearls and sapphires of a kind Allah alone knows. Then the Prophet was taken to the Kawthar and entered paradise. Lo and behold, it contains what no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor human mind ever imagined. On its gate he saw written, "As-sadaqatu bi ashrin amthaliha, wal qardu bi thamaniyati ashara." The charity is repaid tenfold, and the loan 18-fold. The Prophet said, "O Jibreel, how can the loan be more meritorious than charity?" And he replied, "Because one asking for charity may still have some need left, while the borrower does not borrow except his need is fulfilled." The Prophet continued to travel until he reached rivers of milk whose taste does not change, and rivers of wine which bring only pleasure to those who drink it, and rivers of honey purified, and overhanging those rivers were domes of hollowed pearl, whose circumference is like the Aquarius star. The juxtaposition of the areas around Sidrat al-Muntaha are still giving us an indication that like Jannah is greater than all of this. Do you see? And the experience of spirituality in our tradition is not divorced from religion, but everything can essentially be a signpost of something. Do you know? You sit down and you smell like a beautiful flower, and you take it to indicate, like, what must a flower be like in paradise? Do you know what I mean? You want to like reflect on these things, not in a way that creates caricatures, but the idea of like experientially, what must it be like to be in a place that it just has purity to it? No anger, no violence, no like busyness. Do you know? What if you lived a life that had no busyness to it, no feelings of being overwhelmed, just like peace in its kind of most kind of magnificent of forms? Do you see what I mean? Okay. Why don't we do this? Because he's going to go a little bit more into like what he's experiencing here as he is then given kind of the prayers, and we'll do that the next time we meet, and then be able to kind of be wrapped up with some of what it is that we have here. But we've been given like 2 kind of introductions of particular things that have bearing to them, Al-Bayt al-Ma'mur and Sidrat al-Muntaha, both of which are mentioned like explicitly. When Allah takes oath by something, right, as he is doing in Surah At-Tur, he takes oath by like aspects of creation to also give them a sense of like elevation and dignity. So Bayt al-Ma'mur is like an important thing, and Sidrat al-Muntaha is an important thing. They're both explicitly mentioned in the verses that we looked at in the Quran. So just as we take like a pause for tonight, if you want to turn to the person next to you, what do you take from tonight's conversation? What is it bringing up for you? And then we'll come back and discuss and wrap up after we make a couple of announcements. But go ahead.
Why is it everybody just I think that would like kind of help me. Like, trying to hope little things, yeah. Like right now, I'm having it makes my work
He's so powerful. Why does he need to go? Why does he need to fast? I mean, that's a and they all it's free. Look, it's free, so you can insert the lesson. It's indeed in my reference, we have time. So it's through the memorizing of it's through worship. That's the serve because the soul naturally calls to life, right? All humans are born in the natural to call. So when you do that, your soul finds come out right. So I think the blessing
Especially right now, have 70,000
notice how that those changes, those 70,000 years, once they perform they're never sort of 70,000 new things, right? Some of us we kill multiple times. Like, they're like those one pass only. That's an end of time. Still don't have money. Crazy.
7,000 times.
And that's been going on for
I've got
It's deep when you start breaking it down. Under the surface, you realize
Assalamualaikum, take care.
a lot of people take a lot of things for granted. I'm saying from experience. I was younger. We all gave my worship. It's a lot more like I'm doing now. I'm alive. So I it could have took me away many times. A lot of people take it for granted. It's on this video. The more and more I learn about it, I'm just like, sharing this. Seriously.
Oh yeah, we're gonna
One day you see things like
Sorry, so you were given an update. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it would be
Okay. What are some of the things we're taking away? Maybe we can get a couple of people and then we'll wrap up. Anybody taking anything away from today? Nothing? Thanks for ruining the last 2 hours of my life. Thanks. What do we? Yeah.
I was saying that I like the reminder and like the way you said it of like we were not created to be perfect. And we like were created to appreciate Allah who is perfect. That's like a nice reminder.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. Anything else? Yeah.
We talked about how what made an impact was how we have the 24 hours in a day, and if you're praying your 5 prayers and doing all of your worship, there's also more to worship than just praying. Like there's spending time with your kids, there's going and working and having purpose and doing something in your life, there's volunteering. There's so much to do, and you shouldn't just continue yourself into, you know what, I'm gonna pray all day constantly. That's all I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
Yeah, just adding on, I kind of like how we, are trying to reframe worship, meaning it's like we maximize the potential of our moments in salah and worship, but the rest of the things we do throughout our day can be completely, different. Like we're still going to have the struggles and the hardships, but if we kind of approach it differently and our kind of mindfulness and mindset is more nourishing, I think, it makes it all good.
Yeah. Right. Like it's not just I'm Muslim in here, but what I'm doing in here helps me to be Muslim out there. Like how is that happening? Do you know? Because a Muslim is one who does Islam. Islam, Iman, Ihsan. These are all gerunds, like in the Arabic language, right? People know what a gerund is. It's a verbal noun, right? Right, teacher? Yeah. Yeah.
I went out on that.
Yeah. But so like there's a sense that you're doing something, right? It's not just like a name or a label. It has like an active mode of engagement to it, And Islam is the doing of submission, right? And that's an active kind of engagement, whether you're in like a room designated for prayer or you're out there kind of experiencing what it is that the world offers to you, right? But it informs one another, do you know? And then these depictions of things like is giving us a reminder of like, well, what am I working towards? Islam is a holistic religion and it gives you something to prepare for. And what it's preparing you for is the next world, not like this world. This world is just the means to prepare you for the next world. Do you see? Do you know? So how does it all tie in together? Do you get what I mean? Right? And then things that just don't make sense in this world, they're made sense of and balance is restored in the world beyond this one. Right? So we'll pick up on some of these things next time. We won't meet next Wednesday, but 2 Wednesdays from now will be the last time we meet before Ramadan. And then I think I'm going to be doing stuff mostly on Fridays in Ramadan and then like other days of the week, weekends and days that people have other obligations, I'll cover for them. But there'll be like a schedule that Amira puts out with who's doing which pre-iftar halakas. I'm pretty confident Dr. Marwa is going to be doing the majority of Wednesday ones. And so in Ramadan, we'll take a pause on the Seerah, but we'll try to finish Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj like before Ramadan starts. So we won't read like the rest of the book in its entirety, likely, but get to the point now as the Prophet is moving past this kind of ascension towards a Sidratul Muntaha. He's hitting a boundary, and now it's just going to be him, moving forward, right? Okay. There's a convert brunch on Saturday that I think is getting shifted here because there's a lot of people who are very interested in it. To give you an idea, you know, we have, alhamdulillah, like a very large convert community, and everyone's not coming at Jummah. This Friday, 2 people after Jummah will take their Shahada, inshallah. But we had a brother right before this that took his Shahada. People come and like do it in privacy, or, you know, they're visiting from elsewhere and they've heard about our community and they want to do it here. I bring that up like for a couple of reasons. If you're a convert or you're trying to learn more about Islam as a non-Muslim, or you're like a partner of one of those people, we create these spaces particularly so that the nuance of that experience is understood, right? So encourage people to come. I think there's like close to 100 people that have RSVP'd for this Saturdays. And for many of these people, even if they have Muslims that are around them, it's not always Muslims who know what it's like to be a convert. And then, is anything else happening this week?
There's a parents thing, I think, on
After Jummah?
No, on Thursday. Requiring parents navigating IEPs within the New York City education system. Thursday at 6.
Is it on Zoom or here in person?
Zoom.
Yeah, it's on Zoom, right? Yeah. So there's that thing also.
There's a parent here.
Yeah. I'm a parent. I got kids. Huh?
It's the 15th of Shaban, a thing.
There's different opinions on like how you commemorate the 15th of Sha'ban. And I might talk about it a little bit at Jummah on Friday. But like it's one of those things, right? Like our tradition is built off of the idea of diverse opinions, do you know? So if you do something that somebody else might not do, you don't have to be like wrong for them to be right on certain things. But maybe we'll discuss it a little bit more on Friday. We're not doing like a formal program here for the 15th of Sha'ban, but there will be other places that do some of those things. Yeah. Okay, so why don't we take a pause? A lot of us made Isha before we started. Is anybody going to still pray Isha right now that hasn't prayed? Yeah. You're going to make Isha? Yeah. Is anybody, are you the only ones praying, but you're praying alone? Everybody else prayed? Yeah. Did you make the pregnant woman pray by herself? That's so sad. Look at her. Huh? Huh? Yeah. Does. Oh my God. MashaAllah. Okay. We'll see everyone in a couple weeks, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. I think Lubna is going to come and do. Yeah.